In this collection of paranormal stories, we present 3 captivating true tales from the UK of unsuspecting people coming face to face with historical apparitions of soldiers in locations steeped in history. These fascinating narratives demonstrate the remarkable experiences individuals face when they inadvertently cross paths with figures seemingly out of time. Such stories add to the abundance of accounts of the TIMESLIP phenomenon, further confusing our conception of reality. Redcoat soldiers at Shugborough. The Shugborough estate encompasses vast areas of land within Cannock Chase. Boasting a grand manor house built primarily in the 1690s by William Anson, the estate today is a favourite destination for tourists. As a property of the National Trust, it is open to the public, hosting numerous annual events such as pop concerts, Halloween spectacles and more. For anyone who hasn't visited yet, it is certainly recommended for a family outing, particularly for its stunning gardens. Unlike many other paranormal accounts from Shugborough, the following tale did not take place inside the mansion, but within its extensive grounds, far from the staff and enthusiastic visitors. This incident occurred during one of the Halloween spooktacular events when senior couple Frank and Joan Parker mistakenly strayed from the path and found themselves lost on the expansive estate. They had been trying to locate the ghost train attraction that had been recently added that year when they completely lost their bearings. Frank was confident he could guide his wife back to the bustling crowds, but each turn only led them deeper into confusion. To make matters worse, neither of them was proficient with their mobile phones, and Joan had forgotten her glasses. "Let's pause for a moment and think," suggested Frank. "I'm sure we can retrace our steps. That ghost train must be nearby." Unfortunately, Frank couldn't retrace their steps. The darkness combined with the dense woods left them hopelessly lost. Joan started to panic, but her husband tried to reassure her. "If we continue walking in a straight line, we'll surely find a road or path eventually," he said. Suddenly, as if appearing out of thin air, 3 men dressed in vivid red clothing rode past the couple on horseback. Frank called out to them, but they seemed not to hear, and vanished into the distance. Joan noted how peculiar the situation was, and her husband just stood there perplexed. Why would they be riding through the woods in the middle of the night? He wondered. Just then, another 4 men in the same striking red attire came into view. "Hey, you there," Frank yelled at the top of his voice. "We're lost and we need help." This time, the men seemed to hear him. They tugged on their horses' reins and redirected towards Frank and Joan. Stopping just a few feet away, they asked if they could provide any assistance. "Thank you, we could definitely use your help," Frank replied. "We've lost our way and can't find our way back to the Shugborough estate." It was at this moment that Frank and Joan noticed the peculiar attire of the men on horseback. They wore vivid red uniforms, large leather boots, and had swords fastened at their sides. One of the men spoke up. "Turn left at the large ash tree over there, and you'll reach Shugborough in no time. However, we must be on our way, sir. There's a war ongoing, and the King has summoned us. We depart for France in the morning." With that, the 4 men bid Frank and Joan farewell and galloped off into the distance. As instructed, the elderly couple found their way back to the Shugborough estate. After their unnerving experience in the woods, they decided to forego the ghost train and headed home immediately. Upon arriving home, Frank delved into the history of Shugborough. His online research initially yielded little that could explain the words of the men in the woods. However, he soon stumbled upon an artist's rendering of a battle from the 9 Years' War, which started in 1688 and ended in 1697, which coincided with the construction of the Shugborough Manor. In the illustration, Frank recognised the uniforms and even one of the men they'd met. Frank learned that landowners across England had been asked to send men to fight in the war, and that it is regarded by many as the first global conflict. He showed the image to his wife, who agreed that the man they encountered bore a striking resemblance. Was it possible that the horsemen Frank and Joan met that night were the spirits of soldiers sent by the estate's former owner to fight for England in the 9 Years' War? Perhaps. The best army donned their iconic redcoats from 1645 to 1897, so the spirits could have been from any time within that period. While Frank and Joan's encounter in the woods wasn't particularly dangerous and the soldiers seemed friendly, the couple resolved to attend only daytime events at the Shugborough estate in the future. Given their poor sense of direction and inability to use their mobile phones, this decision seemed wise. "If only I'd realised there were ghosts at the time," Frank mused in an interview. "I'd have asked them for next week's lottery numbers." His wife rolled her eyes. "They're ghosts, Frank. They're dead. They don't know anything about the future. You're confusing them with fortune tellers again," she retorted. A possibility overlooked by Frank and Joan, however, is that either they or the soldiers they encountered had experienced the time slip. Roman soldiers in Grisby. In 1977, 32-year-old Dawn had recently left her family home in West Kirby to live with her friend Lynette Scott in Grisby. She had moved out to escape her overbearing mother and grandmother, who constantly told her she would remain unmarried. One afternoon in May, Dawn's grandmother Nora called with unsolicited advice, urging Dawn to find her husband. Frustrated, Dawn hung up and decided to take Lynette's cocker spaniel Millie for a walk. They strolled down Arrowbrook Road, heading towards a mini golf course near Arrow Hall Hospital. However, Millie started acting peculiar, whining and refusing to move forward. Dawn changed course, heading towards a wooded area across a field that locals refer to as the Devil's Woods, known for its history of supernatural occurrences. As dark clouds rolled in, Dawn decided to head back home. Suddenly she heard a gruff male voice and saw two men dressed as Roman soldiers. Initially she thought they were actors or extras and tried to walk away. However, the men ran after her and one grabbed her arm forcefully. Millie growled and snapped at them, but the men seemed intrigued by Dawn's attire. When the taller man spoke in an unfamiliar language, Dawn pulled away and stumbled, falling to the ground. She quickly got up, collected Millie, and rushed away. Upon returning home, she recounted the incident to Lynette, who turned pale and informed Dawn that the men were apparitions connected to a rumoured Roman burial ground near the woods. Dawn couldn't believe it, but the bruise on her arm from the Roman soldier's grip was a tangible reminder of the encounter. Over the next month, the apparitions of Roman soldiers were repeatedly seen outside Lynette's house, seemingly stalking Dawn. In September, Dawn met a man named Barry Edwards and began dating him. One night, while talking in Dawn's room, Barry heard voices outside and saw the Roman soldiers outside the window. Initially disbelieving, he was shocked when the figures vanished before his eyes. Terrified, Barry convinced Dawn to move in with him, and the two eventually married. The Roman ghosts stopped appearing at Lynette's window, but rumours persisted that they continued to haunt the Devil's Woods. So, were the Roman soldiers ghostly apparitions connected to an ancient Roman burial ground, or had Dawn encountered a time slip? The strong physical grip she endured might imply the latter. Early 20th century soldiers at the New Forest. In late September 2020, David Dwyer had a peculiar experience near the town of Brockenhurst in the New Forest. Having recently moved to Winchester for a short-term job, David decided to spend a beautiful day exploring the New Forest. He used a phone app called New Forest Walks to find a route to a spot called Buckland Rings, which was about a 3 to 4 hour walk. Parking at the railway station, he set off at a leisurely pace, taking in the scenery and snapping photos with a DSLR camera. At around 1 p.m, after enjoying his packed lunch, David resumed his walk. He soon noticed movement in the trees to his left and was surprised to see a group of soldiers in old-fashioned khaki uniforms and tin hats jogging through the forest, attire which he would later date to the late 19th or early 20th century. The soldiers also carried outdated rifles, and one at the front wielded a pistol and blew a whistle to lead the group. The group of soldiers moved across David's path, creating a cacophony of noise as they passed. As suddenly as they appeared, a group of soldiers vanished into the trees about 30 metres to the right, and the sound ceased. David assumed the group must have been reenactors or something similar due to their old-style clothing and rifles. He completed his walk, drove home, and decided to investigate the identity of the mysterious group. Over the next couple of days, David contacted the New Forest Authority and Brockenhurst College to inquire about the group, but both organisations denied any knowledge of the soldiers. With no explanation for the strange encounter, David eventually discovered the concept of time slips and grew increasingly intrigued by his unusual experience. So, did David or the soldiers he encountered experience a time slip? If it was a reenactment, how did the soldiers and the noise they were producing seem to vanish so suddenly? And why weren't there any records of permits for such an activity to be held? In the UK, a military reenactment involving firearms requires a Section 5 authority to possess firearms from the Home Office, which, including rifles using blank rounds.